HorrorDeconstruction.
What's up, everybody? It's the HorrorDeconstruction. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Well, YouTube is the place you want to find us. Give us a like, subscribe, share. Hopefully, we'll have enough people to listen to us so we can monetize the channel and Danny and I can finally afford tokens to support our favorite chatterbait professionals. Today, we're going to be talking about High-Rise Invasion, also known as Tenku Shinpan. It is the anime that is based on the manga that you can actually find. Well, if you're smart enough or witty enough, you can find it. It's based on the manga by Miura Suina, and it's a comic that's actually ongoing. I believe it might have been ended. The show covers up to chapter 149 of the manga, and essentially the storyline, because whoever wrote the synopsis on the IMDb they were bored and they almost wrote a paragraph for it. It's essentially a young high school girl that appears at the top of a high-rise building, and she sees that there's actually no way to get down, and the tops of these buildings, essentially the skyline of Tokyo, Japan, and each building is connected by these sort of Indiana Jones style wooden bridges. On top of these bridges, there are other survivors. I guess you could call them survivors, or just people that are there, and they're being menaced by these individuals wearing masks. And the goal of these people wearing masks are to make them have despair enough to jump off the roofs, commit suicide. Although, honestly, that doesn't make sense because there's a lot of these masked people that do terrible things. Anyway, it's a horror. I wouldn't know if I guess it's science fiction as well, anime. And it came out on Netflix on 2021, so it's fairly recent. It just came out, and I had seen the original trailer a while back. I actually saw a piece of the manga a while back, even longer before that, and obviously it takes time to animate something. And it is been adapted as an original anime series for Netflix, so Netflix tends to pay companies to produce these series solely for them, which it's pretty good. But with this series, I don't know what I was kind of expecting. I thought it was going to be a little bit more graphic, a little bit more violent. It is violence, but it's not as graphic as I thought it would be. Like, you could see much more violence in, say, Baki the Grappler, which is another quote-unquote Netflix original, even though I believe that show was out way before Netflix acquired it and paid the money for it. But if you want to see a show that's pretty graphic and really good, is like Devilman Crybaby. There's a handful of really good anime that Netflix has produced or has on their streaming system, like Devilman Crybaby, Baki the Grappler. There's also, I'm not going to say Castlevania because that's an American-produced show, although there's still good. Dorohedoro is a really good show. You can capture things like Kengan Ashura. Now, here's the thing. I'm not as familiar with High-Rise Invasion as a manga, and Netflix has been cheapening around. I'll give them this. The animation in this show is mostly mostly cheap, the way it's produced, but I'm glad that they didn't go the 3D route. Although, who knows if... Nah, it probably would have just sucked anyway. But Kengan Ashura, which is a fighting anime, which is 3D, I was okay with that because I wasn't really familiar with the manga itself, that I would see it jump to the 3D and just like be totally taken out of it. Also, Ajin, which is a great show about these sort of immortal people and this weird sort of stuff, body horror anime, whatever that is. Those are 3D. They did that also recently with Ghost in the Shell, the new one that just came out for Netflix, and which really is sort of crazy because that show is a continuation of Standalone Complex, which is an incredible series which anybody should watch, which is science fiction. But the new version, it's done in this 3D rendering, but like Ghost in the Shell has, like, I don't know how you jump from Standalone Complex, which is gorgeous animation, and you jump to the show, which is sort of, it looks like it's not fully rendered yet. I still enjoyed the show, but it took like 4 or 5 episodes to get used to that sort of very weird sheen to it. Anyway, I'm just glad that this show, even though it's cheaply animated, it's still animated. And you need, 2D animation. I'm all about that. I love it. 3D animation, depending on which project it is, but I do enjoy hand animation. I'd be like, because if you've seen Berserk, when they had a revival of the Berserk anime, and they did that with the worst 3D. I couldn't believe how bad that 3D was. I still enjoyed it because some of Kento Miura's style or his storytelling came through irregardless of how bad that animation was, and I was still okay. It's sort of like, he's like, you date the hottest person in the world, but they got stanky in between the legs, and you know what, you deal with it. Also, Japan Sinks, that's a great show. But anyway, back to this show, High-Rise Invasion. What do we say about this series? It seems to be, there's a universal kind of thought process of this show. What does this show have that isn't in other animes that would make it, stand out? The premise is interesting. It is a death game show. There's plenty of death game shows. There's a live action series on Netflix, which is an adaptation of a manga, which also has a 3-episode OAV called Alice in Borderland. Great fucking show. That is a good fucking show. I was like worried about it, but then I was like, okay, is this just gonna be some sort of weird overacting Japanese melodrama but some weird science fiction element? But no, they did it solid, because that director, we've reviewed a couple of his films on this podcast. So 2 films that he did the live action version of Inuyashiki, which, if you've ever seen the anime, we also covered the anime. It's a series about an old man and a young guy get disassembled and reassembled as high-tech weaponry, and they just, they destroy or help. And it's a great series, 12-episode series, anime, and then also the live action was pretty good. He also did I Am a Hero, the live action version of the manga. Great zombie film, just in general, not just because it was based on a manga. Really good zombie horror film. Great movie. You should check that out. The director's name escapes me, but Alice in Borderland is a sort of a death game. And what a death game anime or manga is, essentially, they'll take a cast of characters. They usually have like 5 to 10 characters that get stuck in this sort of life or death game, and the writers tend to come up with these sort of solutions and stuff like that. Like, it's big brain energy. Like, some of the solutions for these things, I'm like, oh wow, no wonder they're writing and they're smart, and this is gonna make money, because I can't even think of anything that intelligent. But this is what High-Rise Invasion is. It sort of is a death game in the fact that there's a cast of characters and they don't know what's going on, and it seems to be an elimination game. Although, for some reason, we end up having more survivors than we do have victims of heroes within its 12-episode run. Now, we don't know, as the time I'm recording this, if there's going to be a second season. By the reviews, I'm not sure. It has an okay 6.9 average on IMDb. I don't know about Rotten Tomatoes or something like that. But for what it is, High-Rise Invasion is, I guess, watchable. For me, I realize time is very important for people. So I wouldn't be like, yeah, watch it, whatever. You can make your own opinion about it. But for getting into the show, let me just sort of explain what this show has that every other show has. It has pantsu. It has sort of girl-on-girl attraction. It has fan service. It has violence. It has last-minute power-ups. It has Japanese techno. It has the cool faceless guy. It has people in masks. I mean, you've seen this in every anime, essentially. Well, the ones that are a little bit generic, and I think they label this type of show an isekai. And let me see if I can look up what an isekai is. But either way, isekai, I believe, is when people are... Okay, so isekai can include fantasy or science fiction elements, and the term typically refers to Japanese fictional works. It's a genre of light novels, manga, anime, and video games that revolve around a normal human person from Earth being displaced, transported to, reborn, or otherwise trapped in a parallel universe. So this is a genre that's been around for a long time, and you could just name any show like that. I don't know if I've personally seen many shows like that. Isekai, where they just sort of hop into another world and then they're either overpowered. It's sort of like if Superman is the ultimate isekai, because he's from another planet. Kal-El comes to Earth and he's super powered and he's able to do whatever he wants. And that's sort of what the general gist of a Japanese anime is. So if you ever think of Superman, that's an isekai, although radically different from what they do in Japan, because I don't think there were any cat girls showing their titties to Superman. Well, who knows? Maybe the next one. Zack Snyder, get on it. So let's get with these characters. There's a cast of characters that are generic and, a little bit, we've seen all these types. They all fill a quota of Japanese anime. So the main character is Yuri Honjo, who is this schoolgirl who has that blue, aka black hair. That's just for reflective and shadowing reasons. So Yuri Hanjo, to the wiki, a schoolgirl who was suddenly transported into a strange world filled with high-rise buildings, and she and the others like her are chased by killers donning mysterious white masks. So her character is the entry point for all of us watching it, so we're just as confused as she is. I will say this, she's not... She starts out generic. She looks very generic. She has, every 5 minutes is panty shots for her. She jumps up, running around, her underwear is showing. Stuff like that. Although it feels like with the show, its production is cheap enough that they're relying on seeing this girl in her underwear running around. I'm not offended by it. I don't care. I understand that's what the show is. There's another anime that I used to watch that finished, but it will never, truly be finished, which was High School of the Dead, which was a short anime based on a manga about zombies attacking Japan, which was fun, but it was so over the top, such like huge breasted girls in their underwears and thongs, for no reason, shooting guns between their thighs and stuff like that. And that, I think, for all its ridiculous sort of, I believe the manga was actually drawn by a hentai artist, and they essentially just they didn't do porn, but it was almost a porn adjacent. But that was, I think, what they were trying to do in the translation of it, that they were trying to make it that sort of exploitation kind of series. But I think High-Rise Invasion is trying to go for a bigger sort of storyline, which makes absolutely no fucking sense to me, but we'll get into it. Another character is Mayuko Nisei, who is the blonde counterpart of Yuri, and she is an X-mask. So these masked people are people who wear these white masks. They're either forced to wear the masks, or they're, I don't know, I guess there's somebody who's going around making these people wear these masks. The masks have this digital data. As soon as you put it on your face, it rewires your brain to attack people, but you can't attack people that are close to God. Now let's hold on. So there's God candidates in this world, which is essentially the shadow version of wherever they are in Tokyo, Japan. So please don't attack me if you finish the manga. I'm just going from what I'm watching the show. These people are God. They're God candidate characters who can have various. They're not masked. They're just regular people that have put on a mask that have no mouths on them, and they are given powers to, I guess, reshape the world as they see, or reshape this shadow world that they're in. And it's very convoluted and very strange, and I'm not really into the show enough to be I can't wait for season 2. But I just want to see how the writer gets himself out of this situation, because it's one of the most bizarre things I've ever heard. And I'm okay, at least that idea is interesting, that it becomes a death game, because obviously these people are trying to become a god candidate to, I don't know what the end game is. And that at least is intriguing, but it's just that, as I read in one of the YouTube comments, is that the pacing is so bad in the show. It's just so slow and sort of useless scenes, and because they could have chopped out half of this shit. I mean, they covered 149 chapters of the manga into 12 episodes, which is fine, but seeing from the stuff that they did keep, they could have just cut half of this shit out and just get to the action already. And a big, offensive thing is that the gore is not gore. It's not violent. It is violent. You'll see sort of that. It's sort of 70s anime gore, where the blood just sort of splatters. You don't see 1990s or 1980s entrails flying around. You don't see that stuff. You just see blood splatters. That's about as violent as it gets. And this is a show where, people are just blowing each other up and they're shooting each other. And the main thing is people falling off roofs, and you never see anybody hit the floor. You just see them fall, and then you hear a thud. And I actually went to, after I saw the final episode today, I went to go check out the manga, and I'm just looking at how it's really nicely drawn. And I'm oh man, you watching wait, how'd they what happened? Netflix couldn't put an extra couple of bucks to make this look good? Because you're thinking about some of the series that I have been watching, say One Punch Man season 1. Let's not talk about season 2. And Mob Psycho 100. You think about that, and you're looking at the animation of those shows, you're holy crap. But then you got to think about the pedigree of the manga, or who's behind it, or who's directing it, which is it's serviceable. This show's serviceable. So we're dealing with Yuri and Mayuko, who sort of, they're sort of having to find a friendship, and then it rapidly evolves into a little bit something more, and, they're teasing this sort of lesbian attraction between the two, and I'm totally good with that. Like, that's good that it's like, and it's not in a salacious way. Like in the show, it's a salacious way. Like, obviously, it's like, oh, two cute schoolgirls that fall in love with each other, that's sort of the way that they're selling it in the show. But why not make the main character LGBT? That's fine. She doesn't act any different than anybody else. But those two are cool. So Mayuko's a little bit more powered at the beginning of the series because she used to have a mask, and I think the mask became defective. And her subplot is that the machine or whatever is controlling this world or making these people, they're called angels, because they're supposed to shepherd in the new gods, I guess, by eliminating everybody else who's there. And this altar of her is trying to kill her or bring her back into the fold as an angel. So that's what happened. That's her sort of big storyline, and she is sort of like she's sort of the sidekick in the show, I would say. There's not really much depth to any of these characters at all. They all have one singular goal in the show, and the only really deep character is Yuri, the main character. I was surprised because she acts differently to other characters in certain ways. Like there's a doctor character who's an asshole, and then she decides to be a jerk to him and stuff like that. It's small little things like that that make her character at least interesting and likable enough to follow her, but it's not strong enough to follow the show. I mean, that's just my opinion of it. There's Kuan Shinazaki. This is a god candidate. This is a young girl with like this sort of rainbow-esque hair. It's more bluish hair, and she's one of the people that is a god candidate at the beginning of the show. She is able to fire this thing called the railgun, and that's like the highest power so far that anybody has on the show. There's other god candidates there's a bad guy named called Aizawa that he can control 30 of these type of like weird masked people to kill whoever he thinks are enemies. Rika Hanjo, who is Yuri's brother, and I like how they turned the whole sort of generic storyline around to make him the hostage, where the sister's looking to help him. It's a very bizarre notion of a brother and sister love. There's like, I mean, there's gonna be some sort of fucking dojin of incest shit in this or whatever. There's Sniper Mask, who is the cool and unknown guy. He wears a derby and he wears a black suit, or he's your typical shonen hero, like a badass guy who's a sniper, but they bring him into the fold as a good guy. There's just a bunch of other characters, like the doctor, there's a little kid, there's a group of other survivors. Like, we don't have time to spend with most characters, like I'm sure they do in the manga, but it all ends up being, a group of people that work with each other. Would I have liked to see more of the other characters, what they're about? Honestly, sure, but the way that the show's paced, I don't think I would have liked that the way they paced it in the show, because essentially what we're seeing is 12 episodes of Yuri trying to find her brother with these groups of people. There's two sides of groups, and eventually they tend to meet up or they don't meet up. And it's a long sluggish walk to this finale. And they say that there's action scenes, and it's okay. It's nice to see Yuri like power up, because like the most interesting thing about this type of show, you don't go into the show for like a philosophical debate on you're not like watching like you're watching Monster or something, which is a great series that you should check out. You're getting more out of that series, Monster, than you do this. This is an exploitation anime. Maybe it's different in the manga. Like, I would rather finish the manga out than read than watch the show, honestly. I don't want to wait 2 years, another year, just to see the finishing of the series, unless it's actually being animated right now. Rather just read the manga. Manga looks better. It's probably paced better, but there's no really big payoffs in this series. There's some interesting character designs, just the way the masks are. They sort of have this typical smiley face. I'm sure if this show was in America, somebody would sue them because saying the mask looks so generically similar to any emoji that they have. But I will say there's standout moments, like when Mayuko, she gets powered up when she deletes out of her brain that secondary altar, and she's fighting this guy who's like a hero / villain bad guy who's able to power himself up, and they do this really cool effect where she jumps in the air and there's multiple versions of herself. So it's cool shit like that. Like, you go to see this type of anime to see the powers. It's like when I was younger and I used to watch Naruto. I never got to see Naruto Shippuden. I saw Naruto, and you'd see all the Naruto, like the Greenleaf villagers, get their asses kicked, and then at the last minute they pull some trick out of their ass and they are able to fucking get a giant frog to eat somebody. They just did something interesting, and you're like, oh cool, like Rock Lee was able to fuck up that sand asshole at least for 5 seconds, but it was invigorating. So there are moments in here like that make it fun, but but they are few and far between. I will say, if you are frustrated of how the show is like an anime where you're just like, oh boy, it's like, oof. All right, get to it. It becomes that, and you don't want any show to be like that, especially an anime series. I finished the show just because I was going to do this episode of the Horror Deconstruction, and they did have a great payoff for episode 12. But then I realized when I'm reading, some commentaries, like, oh, there's another season, because then as I knew there was going to be like, the manga continued, I was like, oh shit, there's going to be more to this show. Like, at least let them kill whoever the primary antagonist in this season is, so they can just get on to the next person. And I'm just sort of like, oh brother, come on. But the 12th episode, I will say this, the 12th episode is fucking, it's really good, and it has a great soundtrack. Now, it has that typical Japanese anime weird Dance Dance Revolution soundtrack, but they incorporate a lot of choral work, like a lot of chorus and interesting sort of it sounds religious, actually. It sounds like church music. And there's just a scene in the episode 12 with the railgun that's used that's really fucking cool. Like, I was like, holy shit, this is so fucking dope. Like, they put in enough wow moments in the 12th episode that you were like, oh man, at least I got to see that. I got to see that. I'd never seen that before, and that was fucking great. But it's just sort of like watching the other episodes. It's like, even when Yuri runs into a room and there was a girl who was just recently decapitated with their fucking this is so bullshit. The girl's like, help me, and then Yuri breaks into the place, and the girl's decapitated. Her head is fucking falling midair, and it says, you're too late. And I'm like, okay. Anyway, that's not magical. I guess they were just doing a stylistic thing. And she cuts up and fucks up these 5 guys. At least they do this humorous sort of like snake dance behind one shield, which was funny. But like, even though her kicking their ass, it was like, okay, whatever. Like, I don't give a shit. It's just like, I like her character because she starts out as this sort of, it doesn't take her long to become a badass, actually, in the first episode, because she's thinking about her brother. But she's like a scared shitless teenage girl. And it takes her a while, maybe 10 minutes into the first episode, to just like becoming, equilibrium style shooter. Like, she's like super good with guns. Now that she ends up becoming a god candidate herself, like, she has all these kind of cool powers which aren't used as much, which just doesn't make any sense, because Kuon is always using her powers. So it doesn't really make any sense. Anyway, the manga is written by Suina Miura and drawn by Takahiro Oba. So I would suggest if you watch the series and you make it through those first 12 episodes, because I'm seeing a lot of people that are just saying and that's what this anime is. Honestly, it's a meh kind of anime series, which sucks because there's such potential. Just the idea of it as sort of a death game on top of a couple of buildings, and just going between these buildings, you don't really know what the hell's going on. And apparently it was a pretty popular manga to get adapted into a series, so enough people were reading the books to do that. And I think the idea is good. The execution of it isn't good. The voice acting from the Japanese is very good. I don't watch dub anime, and I don't say that because I'm proud of it. It's just that they all sort of sound the same in American dubbing, and it drives me insane. There's only two series that I can think offhandedly that sounded great, which were Berserk, which had great American dubbing, and clearly Cowboy Bebop, which I think is the gold standard. Because every other American anime voiceover is like, hey Akane, what are you up to? It all sounds like that shit. But this, I watched the Japanese dub, and I was like, this is good acting. It's usually good Japanese acting, so they did it good here. The soundtrack is actually really well done. The theme song is good. The ending theme is good. The only thing I don't understand about the opening theme is not loud enough. I don't know if that makes me sound crazy, but it was just like, it has a syncopated beat that sounds really good, that if they just make it louder, it'd be cool. But it seems like they just don't. So the soundtrack is great. The character designs are okay. They're sort of generic manga characters. The way they all look. The designs of the masks are fine, I guess. They sort of just are regular characters in different attire. Like, there's a woman who's like an ara woman, like one of those older women that seduces young men or something like that. That type of woman. There's a standout. The hero angel, I guess, is the primary antagonist of the 12th episode, even though he just shows up in the 11th episode kind of character. His look is pretty interesting. He's just wearing some sort of blue skin tight shark suit that has a fin on the head. But they all sort of look like, if you just picked any random manga, you could probably find characters that all look like this. They all look the same. They all fit a certain archetype of a look. I also do want to point out that there's an old man in the manga who like helps them. I'm trying to think of which one it is. Anyway, I can't get his name, but he's just this old guy that helps him around. He's pretty funny because he's like this old geezer that tries to, save the day, and he's just funny. I don't know what else I can bring up with the show, but the action is sort of okay. It's funny how you see some of the budget go into some of the animation scenes, and then the rest of it is not there, and that really affects the show because it's not choppy animation, but there's just something about it. It seems like there's not enough shading to the show, if that makes any sense. It seems like there's only certain limited color palette to the series, but I'm not going to say this is a recommendation. I'm not going to say it's a waste of time because there are 2 or 3 or 4 elements that I enjoyed, but it takes a hell of a long fucking time to get to those parts because you are just watching paint dry with the show. And it's not boring that nothing is happening. It's just that the way that they chose to pace an action series by not doing much, and when they do what they are set out to do, it's not that interesting. So in the end, I would give this series a 4.5, 5. The 12th episode showed promise of some interesting adaptation work there, but it's not strong enough to be like, oh man, I can't wait to see the next season. It's just like, oh, will that show come back? All right, maybe I'll watch it. So I'll give it a 5 out of 4.5 out of 10. A 4.5 out of 10. Possible teenage girl lesbian relationship, but then there might be an incestuous idea of the main girl for her brother? With that, it's been the Horror Deconstruction.
The Horror Deconstruction.